Everybody all right?
Everybody's all right.
We are good. It's good
Baruch
time.
Rabbi, we're all good.
You're all good is good. You're all good is good. Very happy to see everyone. So basically, like I mentioned before, that on the WhatsApp, on the message, and on the email, that on Wednesday, we actually, it's the eve of Tisha B'Av. I have an echo. Why? I don't know. It's the eve of Tisha B'Av. And when it comes to Tisha B'Av, we actually have a very interesting law which forbids us to study Torah. Usually we know that studying Torah is an obligation that we have to do throughout our life every day. Anytime we have is a big mitzvah to be involved in Torah study. But since Torah is the quality of joy, it makes a person happy. When you study Torah, you're going to be a happy person. And the day of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is a day that we're supposed to refrain from happiness. So therefore, we are staying away from learning also. So not only are we not eating on the 9th of Av, not only do we not drink, we don't bathe, we don't wash, but we actually also are not studying at least regular subjects in Torah, which may lead a person to simcha, to joy. And that prohibition, or the restriction, I should rather say, against learning, starts from the eve of Tisha B'Av, which is on Wednesday afternoon, all the way till Thursday night. The only thing that you could study is subjects which relates to mourning. So for example, you can study the stories or the insights about the destruction of the temple. Some people have a custom to read the book of Job, which obviously this book is relating all kinds of information, which is not going to make you happy to see what kind of severe suffering the man Job had experienced in his life. So there are communities which are actually have that tradition, that custom, to study or to read the book of Job. And you can so also read other chapters and other subjects in Tanakh and in the Talmud, which are relating this type of experiences. For example, in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Gittin, it brings all kinds of stories what took place during the destruction of the temple. And when you read the stories, it is Torah, and Torah is always energizing, but it's obviously, since it's discussing subjects of Torah which relate to sorrow and to sadness and to mourning, so therefore these are the things which is okay to study during the 9th of Av. But regular Parasha, weekly Torah portion, or study just regular subjects of Torah, as King David writes in Tehillim, Pikudei Hashem Yeshorim Mesamchei Lev. The ordinances of God, the commandments of God, the instructions of God are straight, and they bring joy to the heart. So bring that it clearly specifies Torah as a source of joy, and we don't want to be experiencing joy or feeling joy in a day which marks the tragedy of the destruction first of the first temple, and then 480 years later, the destruction of the second temple, all happening in this day of Tisha B'Av. And as we also discussed many times, that in Jewish history, the 9th of Av was a day of sadness. Historically, there are various situations, various experiences which happened at that very same day, which was not good, and it was actually historically changing from a happy life to a, God forbid, the opposite, and therefore this is what became to be considered a national day of mourning, a Jewish national day of mourning. So therefore, we, not to miss out the opportunity to study the Torah Parsha, we are here tonight getting together to discuss the Parsha. The topic which we wrote in the message was, I think the topic was, let me take a look. The topic said something about crying. Isn't it enough to cry? Right. Isn't it enough to cry? Basically, the question is, you cried last year of the destruction of the temple, and nothing happened, right? What do you mean nothing happened? You weren't answered. The temple was not built yet. 2 years ago, we did the same, and nothing happened. 3 years ago, we did the same. As long that I remember myself, I always know that the 9th of Av was a very, as they say in Yiddish, a kalamutna day, not a happy day, where people went to synagogue, sat on the floor, and the lights, even in the synagogue, were dimmed. I even remember in Jerusalem as a kid growing up that people were walking holding like an old style can and a candle inside it, because they did not turn on the electricity in the synagogue at all. They were literally sitting in the dark and in the presence of a candle to magnify the feel that this is not a day which is regularly. We sit on the floor. This is our mourners are observing the Shiva, the 7th day of mourning, is by sitting on the floor. That's how they do it. And if that's how it's being done, so the question is, why is it? Why do we keep on asking if we weren't answered once? We weren't answered twice. Maybe it's enough. Maybe it's time to realize that God is not answering. And if he doesn't answer, stop bothering him. If you're trying to get something from somebody, you try it once, you try it twice, you try it 3 times, you try it 10 times, but eventually you give up. He doesn't give you what you want. You asked, and he doesn't respond. So that means he's not interested in giving it to you. So leave him alone and let him give it to you when he's going to be ready to give it to you. What are you bothering him? What are you bothering? Maybe enough is enough. Maybe enough is enough. Maybe it's not important to continue asking when we don't get answered to what we ask. The Gemara actually says, the Talmud says, there are 3 things that every person is dealing with it on a daily basis. The Gemara calls it 3 avirot, 3 violations, 3 transgressions that it's very difficult to stop. We always, a regular person will every single day most probably violate that prohibition. And the Gemara says one of them is iyun tefillah. There are 3 things. One is hirur avera, to have a thought to do something wrong. You're not doing something wrong, but you have a thought, I would have liked to do something which is not permissible. It's very difficult to control that thought. The Gemara says that every person, every single day, with at some course during the day, want to do something wrong, he might have controlled it, but he would have the thought, that initial thought of doing something not right. This is number 1. It's called hirur avera, a thought of sin. Number 2 is the common famous one, Lashon Hara. Very difficult when you meet people and you speak on the phone or so on, not to discuss something negative about another person. Also, one of the things that the Gemara doesn't find it possible for a person to control it every single day. And then the Gemara says the third thing. What is the third thing? The third thing is called Iyun Tefillah. What is Iyun Tefillah? It's reflection on prayer. Says the commentary on the Talmud. This is in Tractate Baba Basra, page 164b. Says the Rashbam, Iyun Tefillah. Iyun Tefillah, he says, there are those who explain that after a person davens, he thinks in his mind that God should have probably listened to my prayers because I davened. And when his expectations is not fulfilled, when he realizes that his prayers were not answered, so then he starts considering the fact that he davened. He starts thinking to himself, what did I do? I didn't gain much. What did I accomplish by davening with my prayers if God didn't answer them? Meaning, the Talmud considers that a common feel, maybe even a normal feel. It's not normal because it's not right. It's not kosher to think like that. But the Talmud considers that a feel of which a person probably considers every day. If you daven every day and you have expectations for your prayers to be answered, and some of them are not answered, then you have the feel that something is wrong. Something is wrong with my tefillah, or something is wrong with the one who's supposed, God forbid, who's supposed to answer my prayers. So this is what we call a common thing. So the question is, this we started our class, why do we keep on asking for the Beis HaMikdash to be rebuilt? Why do we keep on asking for Mashiach to come? Maybe enough. You tried. It didn't work. He's not interested. Move on. Stop bothering him. You know, they say somebody was standing by the kotel. Someone was standing by the Wailing Wall, and he was like asking God to help him with a business deal. He had a huge business deal. The business deal had, a lot of millions of dollars, and he's asking God to help him to receive the loan for the millions of dollars he needs for the deal. And next to him stands a Yid, a small Jew, and he's also asking God. And what is he asking? He needs a couple $1,000 or, $200 to pay his rent. And the guy is asking for the millions, turns to him and he says, what are you bothering God? You're disturbing me. You interfering with such small, stupid requests. Just take your $200 and move on. Let me take care of my request. So meantime, the guy who asked for $200, I guess his prayer was answered. The guy who prays for the millions of dollars, I guess, is still waiting for his prayer to be answered. But either way, this is the question of tonight. Why is this question also really important? Because it really relates to the Parsha that we always read in the week of Tisha B'Av. Before Tisha B'Av, we read Parshas Dvorim. After Tisha B'Av, we always read Parshas Va'etchanan, which is the beginning of this Parsha, which is the second Parsha in the book of Dvorim. And what does the Parsha begin? Va'eschanan el Hashem bo'ei sa'i leimer. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people, this is what the old Parsha is. He's telling us, he's rebuking us and he's inspiring us, but he's speaking to us. This Parsha is not about God speaking to us. It is Moshe repeating to us what he and what we have heard in this past 40 years and going through various experiences that we had experienced during the 40 years after leaving Egypt. So the Parsha begins, V'eschanan el Hashem. Moshe says, I implored Hashem at that time. What does imploring Hashem mean? Says Rashi, V'eschanan, this is one of 10 expressions which describe prayer. There are 10 types of prayers. There is Bakasha, there is Tfilah, there is Tchina. There is all kinds of words that a person can use when he wants to talk about prayer. And really, each one of those words bring out another element of prayer. This is being discussed in many books. There's the famous Hasidic rabbi from Chernovitz who wrote the book Siduro Shel Shabbat and Be'er Maim Chaim, who is buried in Tzfat. He later moved from Chernovitz to Tzfat. He actually wrote a book. The name of the book, we have it in the library in the Torah Center. It's called Sharat Tfilah. In that book, he goes by and he discusses these 10 different variations for the idea of Tfilah. And he explains very beautifully each word, each term actually brings out a whole different type, a whole different direction and channel of tefillah, of prayer. So the Parasha begins that Moshe Rabbeinu says to Bnei Israel, to the Jewish people, I prayed at that time. Rashi explained what does it mean at that time. That was the time when they conquered the land of and Og.
Cannot hear you very well.
Sichon and Og, actually, the others on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And in regard to some, a similar everything. But there's a few things which the land, what? What is it? Hello? Okay. So regarding certain things, the land of Sichon and Og carries a status of Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu said that since we saw now that we conquered the land of Sichon and Og, and Sichon and Og carries a certain level of the holiness of Israel, so maybe God has forgiven his pledge not to let me into the land, and maybe God has already decided, yes, I'm going to let him in, because you see, I got Sichon and Og, and I'm still alive. So maybe it's time to go to the next step and to actually cross the Jordan River and enter the land. But for that reason, he prayed. And he prayed for Etchanan. He prayed, as the prayer goes, Hashem Elokim, God my Lord, Ato achiloiso la'arois es avdecho es gotlecho es yotcha chazoko. You have begun to show your servant your greatness, your strong hand. And he says, please, Ebrono ve'eres oretz atova. Please let me cross the Jordan and see. And he wants to see Eretz Atova. He wants to see the good land. And Ahar Atov, the good mountain. And Rashi says the good mountain refers to Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. Ve'al Lebanon, he wants to see the Lebanon, which here Rashi says it means the Bet HaMikdash. It means the temple, because Lebanon comes from the word Lavan. Lavan means white, and the temple is the place which our sins get whitened. They become white. But nevertheless, Hashem refused his prayer. And the Medrash describes how Moshe prayed. Says the Medrash like this. What did Moshe do? Moshe put on a sack, with ashes. And he was standing and really pleading with God to the point that he was shaking heaven and earth. And what did Hashem do? Hashem, says the Medrash, made an announcement on every gate of heaven, on every tribunal court in heaven. Hashem made it clear, do not accept Moshe's prayers. Don't let it in, because it was already sealed and signed that he is not going into the land. Says the Medrash, how much did he keep on repeating his prayer? The numerical value of the word Va'etchanan. Va'etchanan in Hebrew is 515. So it says the Medrash, Moshe Rabbeinu prayed 515 times. Meaning he repeated one prayer, yet another prayer, yet a third prayer, and a fourth prayer, just begging God to let him into the land. To the point that, as you see on verse 26, Vayomer Hashem Elai, Moshe says, eventually God said to me, Ravloch, enough! Al Tosef Daber Elai Oy Vadovar Hazeh. Do not continue to speak to me any further about this matter. Can you imagine that he's praying so much, and God not only doesn't listen to his prayers, but at some point God tells him, must speak, enough. I don't want to hear you anymore. The obvious question is, why did God stop? Why wasn't his prayers accepted? And you see a Yid who is standing and begging once, twice. Why are you stopping him? Why are you stopping him? Don't daven anymore. Why not? Davening is an opportunity. The guy feels good about praying. Don't we all have in our lives things that we prayed for, and maybe they weren't answered, but at least we had the good feeling that we prayed to God. Why take away even that minimal opportunity for Moshe and to tell him, no, Al Tosef, I don't want to hear about it, don't even try. The guy wants to daven. Daven. The fact that I don't hear you, that's my problem. The fact that you want to daven while I don't hear you, that's your problem. But why are you shutting him down? The Pasuk says clearly on verse 26, Al Tosef, don't daven. And what happened? He prayed 515 prayers. What happened eventually? Why did he stop? Why did he stop? Why didn't he pray 516 prayers? Maybe that additional prayer will make it work. What are you stopping? If you're ready, daven till now, keep on going. Keep on going. This is the question. And we explained already that when Moshe started praying, it wasn't stam that he started praying. He started praying because he felt there is an opportunity here. That's why it says Ba'eta I, at that time. This is what Rasha says. That since they conquered Sichon and Og, and Sichon and Og is going to be a land that they're going to have to bring, for example, Bikurim, the first ripe fruit that you bring from your field, applies in the land of Israel, but it also applies across the Jordan from the land of Sichon and Og. And that's what gave Moshe Rabbeinu the idea of looking to make it happen. There's actually an interesting insight that it says that the day that Moshe prayed, it actually relates to the 15th of Av. The 15th of Av is the week after Tisha B'Av, which is considered a big holiday. It's not celebrated in a religious manner, meaning we don't have any halachot regarding 15th of Av. But the 15th of Av says is a very special day. The Talmud says that there was no greater holidays than the 15th of Av. And there is all kinds of reasons. The Gemara mentions about 6 things what happened on the 15th of Av. The first thing what happened, the Gemara says that when God decreed after the spies that they are going to die in the desert, so every year, since the story of the spies happened on the 9th of Av, that's when they came back, and then is when everybody cried and said, why are we here? We should have stayed in Egypt, and so on. So every 9th of Av, people used to die. They basically used to go into they used to dig. These are the people which were in between the age of 20 and 60, which there was decreed against them not to go into the land. So every year, those men who were reaching the age of 60, so you know after 60 you're not going to live anymore. So they used to dig themselves the so-called their own grave and lie there, went to sleep there. Next morning, they were not waking up. Next morning, the only thing which was left was for the Chevra Kadisha to come and to cover them with earth, to cover them in the desert sand, and that was the end. That happened every year on the 9th of Av. Anyone who turned 60 that year, that's it, died. The big miracle happened on the 40th year. Before the 40th year, there were about 15,000 last people who are reaching the age of 60. And they were forced to die that year. It comes the 9th of Av. They dig their graves. They lie down there, and they're waiting to finish up life. They say Shema once, and they say Shema again, and they think about all the wonderful things they've experienced in life, knowing that this is the end. And lo and behold, the sun rises, and everyone opens their eyes, and they see we didn't die. So they thought, probably we messed up the calendar. We didn't count the days properly. It must be that it's not the 9th of Av yet, maybe tonight. Same thing happened the next night. So they thought, oh, maybe tomorrow night. But when it came the 15th of Av, the 15th of Av is the time when it's the middle of the month. So the moon is in full shape. So no one can make a mistake on the 15th of Av to think that it's not the 9th of Av yet. If you see the moon, the way it's shaped in the 15th of Av, then you are 100% sure that the 9th of Av has already passed. So then they realize that that's it, the decree is over. And we're getting ready to enter the land. So that was the first reason why the 15th of Av was celebrated as a Yom Tov, as a holiday every year. This is what the Gemara says, one of the 6 reasons, the 6 events, the 6 occurrences which happened in the 15th of Av. So some Hasidic books write that what happened, that same thing happened to Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu, he knew that God swore that all the people after 60 are going to die in the desert. So when he saw that they stopped dying, so again he took it further to assume that maybe that oath that God took not to let Moshe into the land is also over. So he grabbed the opportunity and he said, oh, in that case, let me give it a try. Let me try praying again. There is actually a very interesting insight which I learned the first time today. This is written in a book called Pnei Yeshua. I have it at home. This is a commentary on the Talmud of a rabbi who was actually the Gemara teacher of the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. But before the Maggid came to the Baal Shem Tov, he studied Talmud. He studied the regular discussions of Torah, the so-called the revealed parts of Torah. And his teacher is the one who wrote a book called Pnei Yeshua. I have the book at home, a 3-volume book, which is a commentary on the Talmud. And he says a very, very special insight into this idea which we just discussed. He actually calculates how do we know that Moshe prayed 515 prayers. So he says like this. When did Moshe start praying? As we just explained, he started praying on the 15th of Av when he saw that the people are not dying anymore. So he says like this. From the 15th of Av, pay attention everybody. From the 15th of Av to the 7th of Adar, this is when Moshe died. How many days is there? It counts up that it's 200 days. There is 6 months of Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat. 3 of these 6 months is full months, which means that every month is 30 days, which means it's 90 days. 3 of these 6 months are short months, which means it's month of 29 days. Then 3 months is only 87 days. So he says, from the 15th of Av till the 7th of Adar, you actually have 177 days, plus 23 days in Av, because from the 15th of Av till the 30th of Av, you have 23 days. And then you have 7 days from the 1st of Adar till the 7th of Adar when Moshe died. So altogether, you have exactly 200 days. Among those 200 days, you have 28 Shabbatot, 28 days, which is Shabbos. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to ask for your personal needs. According to Halakha, Shabbat, you have to be busy in praising God. You can daven about Mashiach, but not personal needs. So now, if you take off from the 200 days, which is between the 15th of Av till the 7th of Adar, you take off 17 days, right? Take off 17 days. How many days do you have left? What? Okay, so you get it. From 200 days, you take off 28 Shabbatot, you have left what? 172 days. Right? Right. How many times does a Jew pray a day? 3 times. So 172 times 3 is 516. 516. Moshe began his davening like he always met God in the morning. So he started davening the 15th of Av in the morning until Mincha, the 7th of Adar. He did not daven the Ma'ariv the night before the 15th of Av. So how many prayers did Moshe daven? 515 prayers. You got it? 172 times 3 minus the night from before the 15th of Av that he did not daven yet is exactly the 515 prayers. This is by Hanan. This is what Moshe prayed 550 times to Hashem. A beautiful, kind of reflection and insight into the idea of Moshe davening 515 times. But the bottom line is, after everything, what did Hashem tell him? No more. Why? Why? So there is 2 things which I want to share with you. One is that actually, which is brought on in the Malbim. The Malbim, his name was Meir Leibish. He was a rabbi in Bucharest. And he wrote a famous commentary on Tanakh called the Malbim. Very beautiful commentary. I remember when my wife, when Mrs. Farkash, was teaching in Yeshiva High School, she taught the Megillas Esther, School of Esther, the School of Ruth, according to the Malbim. So we used to sit every night and study together the Malbim. Unbelievable. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful insight. So the Malbim says as follows. Moshe, basically, remember the story with Moshe and Korach, when Korach was looking for to be a Kohen Gadol, and he started fighting. He wanted to. Basically, what he goes on and discusses the idea that what Hashem is telling Korach, listen, everybody has his mission in life. You are the rich man, Korach. Your job is to be rich and to work with the world and to meet business people and to sit with the bankers and to give tzedakah and to see all the people in downtown and talk with them about business and at the same time to talk to them about God. So you have a mission. You have a shlichus. What does Korach want? He wants to be a Kohen. A Kohen is completely separated from the world. A Kohen is in the Beis Hamikdash. He's busy with the temple. He doesn't walk around downtown. He doesn't walk around in the world. He's detached, separated, sitting with the prayers of the Levites, with the prayers of the Israelites, with their korbanot, with their sacrifices. And that was the confusion. Moshe is telling Korach, if you're going to be looks like they're all disconnected. Something was disconnected in my computer. We're all back together. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
So basically, Hashem tells Aaron Moshe tells Aaron, you can't be Korach. Korach, you cannot be Moshe. Everybody has his shlichus. And the same thing is what Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu now. He doesn't just ignore him. Hashem tells him, Ravloch, stop praying to me about it, because this is not what you are meant to be. You are meant to be here in Midbar. This is what your shlichus is. This is what you were created for. You're going to be spending your life and even after your life in the sand of the desert, together with all the people who died in the desert, together with everything what the desert represents. This is what you were meant. Kens davinen from today till tomorrow. This is what you are meant for. This is what you are meant for. You can try and add more and more. Someone like, you have a tea and you put in 2 spoons of sugar and 3 spoons of sugar and it's very sweet. Now comes and you add another spoon of sugar and 7 spoons of sugar. Are you going to make it sweeter? It's not going to become sweeter. This is it, you know? This is your shlichus. This is your life. You want to be happy, Moshe. That's it. This is what you need. You don't need more. This is what you have. This is the idea of Rav Loch. This is what the Malbim says. Rav Loch, you have enough. This is an answer which takes us out from the context of prayer. It's actually a nice answer, which gives us an idea, at least a rational understanding, why Moshe's prayer was not accepted. He wanted one thing, and God convinced him, no, you don't belong there. Not because I ignore your prayers, that means I ignore you. I don't give you because I think this is what you need. This is what you need. You think you need more? You don't need more. Like somebody told me, you got married after Corona, and he was planning to have a 400 or 500 people wedding, and then he only ended up having a 50 people wedding. And I felt sorry for him. But he was stronger than me. And he tells me, Rabbi Farkash, you don't understand. I thought I need a 500 people wedding. It was my mistake. God proved me wrong by letting me understand that I did not need a 500 people wedding. I was very happy to have a 50 wedding. It was a beautiful wedding, and my Shalom Bayis is great, and my wedding day is going to be remembered. Whatever comes to the neighbors that they had to be invited. But until he had the 50 people wedding, he would have never think that the 50 people wedding is enough for him. Maybe God is punishing him, but he was helped to realize that it was a perfect wedding. This is exactly what he needed. Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Malbim, exactly what you told Korach. Remember you told Korach that he should not look to be a Kohen because he is rich and this shlichus is to be involved in the world? And remember you told Aaron that he should not look to be rich because he has to be a Kohen? So I'm telling you, Moshe, I'm not taking your prayer because you don't belong there. And if you don't belong there, it's not going to do any good for you. You have to live where your shlichus is. And if that's your shlichus, you're going to be perfectly fine in living the life which you were meant to be, and therefore I'm asking you, stop it. Genug, al toisef. So this is one insight given by the Malbi. But I want to take it a little bit into the context of prayer also. The context of prayer is as follows. The idea is, how do we view prayer? A person can look prayer and say, look, I stormed the heavens. I stormed the heavens. I davened, and I davened, and I davened, and I davened. And you know what? Nothing happened. The Torah tells us, no. Take a look at Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu davened, and he davened 515 times. And it had an impact on God. What's the biggest proof? What's the biggest proof that he had an impact on God, that his prayers worked? That God told them, stop. If it doesn't matter, why does God tell him to stop? I don't listen anyway. So why do you tell him to stop? Because God knew that since it doesn't belong yet in Israel, one more prayer and it's going to make it happen. Because prayer works. So therefore he told them, I need you to celebrate now because I'm not ready to let you in. You understand the opposite philosophy over here? The psychology is completely the opposite. People look at Moshe Rabbeinu and say, look, he prayed 515 times and nothing happened. Maybe it proves you that prayer means nothing. I say the opposite. If prayer means nothing, what do you care if he prays another 600 times? Let him go, come on. 515, 516, 517, 518, let him move on. What do you care? If God has to interfere and he has to hold Moshe by his hand and said, Moshe, better, I'm asking you, stop it. That means that God knows, and this is the truth, that one more prayer, and it tips the scale over. It tips the scale over, and Moshe is going into the land because prayer works. So God has to get out of his so-called his own comfort zone and tell Moshe, ich bedir. I'm asking you, please stop it. I need you to stop. I need you to stop. The fact that he has to tell him to stop is the biggest proof how strong and how far can prayer get you. Verstehst? This is what's happened here. Moshe was forced to pray 516 prayers to get into the land. And therefore, after 515, God told him to stop. Because there was the one more prayer which made it, which would have get him into. There's a famous discussion that talks about Sisra. You know that on Rosh Hashanah, very soon we're going to have Rosh Hashanah coming up. It says in Shulchan Aruch that we are blowing 100 sounds altogether. And these 100 sounds has to do with the mother of Sisra, who was waiting for her son to come back from war, and she was crying, anticipating his return, and she had 100 tears coming out of her eyes, and in response to this 100 tears, that's why we have 100 sons on Rosh Hashanah. And I think 2 years ago we discussed that, what's the connection. But I want to ask you a question. What does it mean 100 tears? Who was there counting 100 tears? Maybe it was 90 tears, maybe it was 120 tears. What is the idea of 100 tears? Somebody is counting, drop, 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 drink. What happened there? And our sages tell us that God counts every single tear that somebody is shouting in prayer is being counted. It's being counted. This is what the Medrash said. Actually, there's a pasuk in Tehillim. In Tehillim it says, Sima dimasi benaydecha. We are asking Hashem, please put our tears in your jar. And the Talmud tells us that God has a jar. And in that jar, he puts in and he counts up all the tears. All the tears. And when time comes, even those tears is not being used specifically for the purpose he was davening for, the purpose he were crying for. When time comes, all those tears are being counted up together and creating a formula of enough tears to bring about that what you need to get. So let's say, for example, I pray that I should get a job. And I shedded 500 drops of tears. But I didn't get a job. For whatever reason, God didn't feel there's a job for me. And now I'm praying for the health of my child, which God says that needs 1,000 drips of tears. But I only shedded 500 tears. But since no tear gets lost, and what happens is that Hashem is putting together the tears of the past with the tears of the present and joins them together, and he creates the enough amount of tears that it's necessary and needed for the fulfillment of whatever prayer you are praying here now for. This is a famous, important concept in Tefillah, and this is the important concept when it comes in and understanding what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu. You can look at Moshe Rabbeinu's prayers and you say, what happened? Nothing happened. What do you mean nothing happened? Hashem always pays back. Always pays back. He just doesn't tell us how long it's going to take. That's the only problem. So if you take a look, even in modern days times, that 3 years after the Holocaust, without any rational way of explaining, hundreds and thousands and eventually millions of Jews are gathered in Eretz Yisrael, surrounded with the worst of our enemies from all over,
anti-Semites, with all kinds of enemies. And what comes the end? We are learning and studying, and people, yeshivas are being built, and schools, and so on. What does it tell you? It tells you that the prayer what Moses prayed, 515 prayers, 3,300 years ago, is now being materialized. It didn't go to vain. It wasn't lost. Every prayer moves something. Every prayer shakes something. Every prayer accomplishes something. If it's not exactly how we meant it to be, so it's exactly how the great God meant it to be. And this is what this Parasha teaches us. The Parasha teaches us, do not stop praying. Do not stop praying. Don't stop praying. First of all, because every prayer comes to use. And prayer has an impact. The first proof is that God had to tell Moshe to stop. If he wouldn't do anything, he wouldn't have told him to stop. But that could have bring a situation which the world was not ready for Moses to be in Israel, for whatever the reason is not important for now. But he wasn't meant to go in there. So God had to tell him, I can't have you pray one more, because the one more prayer will tip the scale. So that shows you how much prayer works. And at the same time, all those prayers that Moshe Rabbeinu davened, it all came together. It all comes together by other things which happens to us in our life. Sometimes something good is happening in your life, even today, and you think, oh, I was so successful, I had a good day. And you don't even realize that it was 100 years ago that your elder Baba, your great-grandmother, was sitting in a little hut in a shtetl somewhere and praying to God for something. And that prayer was seemingly not accepted because God wasn't ready to give it to you at that point. But that very same prayer that she prayed 100 years ago came now 2020 in your personal life, and something good happened, and you don't even know that this is a result, a direct result of that prayer which your elder Baba prayed somewhere in Spain or in Morocco or in Ukraine or wherever she lived. Don't give up praying. Especially when it comes, as we stand before Tisha B'Av, in the prayer and the reflection about the Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes you feel like Ginug. We prayed last year, and we sat on the floor 2 years ago. It's a famous story. I always say this story. I'm going to read it for you. The story of Napoleon. So what is the story with Napoleon? Where is the story? Just a second. The story of Napoleon. Just a second. I'm going to read it for you because I wrote it. I especially kept it. Anyway, I can't find it now. Doesn't matter. The story of Napoleon is that everybody knows that Napoleon was on his way to Israel. He was actually in Akko, they say. And while being there, he saw one day something very strange. When he realized that the Jewish people or the Jewish community, somehow people are like kind of, quiet or ill. I think I wrote it down here. Just a second. No, not the reader. One more try and that's it. Just a second. Anyway, I can't find it. Anyway, the point is that Napoleon was witnessing the Jewish community observing Tisha B'Av, sitting on the floor and crying. And Napoleon said that people who cry for a house which was destroyed 2,000 years ago are for sure going to marry to see that same house being rebuilt. That's the bottom line. And what's the meaning behind it? He saw it in his way. What we're seeing it is in the way that as long as we are still praying for the temple, this should encourage us to continue praying. Because if we would have had enough prayers by now, so either the temple would have been rebuilt already, or God would have told us, come on, stop it, I'm not ready, so I can't have you pray either. The very fact that we are still praying for the temple shows that more prayers are needed, and those prayers will get their job done at the time that we are ready for it, which is obviously this time. So when it comes to Tisha B'Av, and we're going to sit on the floor and mourn about the destruction of the temple, we're not only going to mourn on the past, but at the same time, we're going to daven and strengthen ourselves and daven even more to ask Hashem, we are looking to see with our own eyes how you are returning to Zion with mercy. Return to Jerusalem. Or as we say after meal, please God, build Jerusalem speedily in our days. And we're looking forward to see this day being transformed to days of joy and festivity by the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu and the rebuilding of the temple in Yerushalayim. B'meira b'yameinu. Amen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Have a wonderful, good week. I want to remind you, on the email, it also said the schedule for the 9th of Av. The fast will start around 8:45, and then we're going to have services in synagogue 9:20 in the evening, and then we are also going to have davening and services on Thursday. Prepare yourself properly, drink a lot, and be ready to welcome Mashiach on Tisha B'Av. Thank you. Have a wonderful good day. We want to see Abraham is here. Let's mention this is the end hour, last hour